Well, thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. If you haven't yet participated, please do participate in our poll this morning. And we're asking you about the DA's Congress this weekend. And we're going to talk about that as well right now. Now, two Democratic Alliance candidates will be competing for the party's top position in a virtual conference to be held this weekend to elect its new leadership. The two candidates running for the party's federal leadership position are John Steenhuisen, who's the interim federal leader of the DA and also a member of parliament who served as provincial leader and the party's caucus leader in KwaZulu-Natal Legislature. Alongside him is Mbali Ntuli, who is the former federal youth leader of the DA and also currently a member of the KwaZulu-Natal Legislature. Now, the conference was originally scheduled for May this year, but had to be postponed due to the outbreak of COVID-19. The elective conference follows the party's policy conference, which was held in September. And political analyst Khanyi Magubane and Institute for Race Relations, or IRR analyst Gabriel Crouse, join us now to discuss the current state of the Democratic Alliance as they head to that Congress this weekend. Gabriel and Khanyi, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much.
Khanyi, let me start with you, and I'll give you the first bite at this cherry, and then Gabriel, you can also weigh in. Let's talk about the candidates, John Steenhuisen and Mbali Ntuli, and they, of course, vying for the leadership position, a federal leader of the Democratic Alliance. So let's first talk about what it is that both of them offer, what they bring to the table, the skill sets that each of them actually embodies. Starting with you, Khanyi.
I'm actually quite glad that you're starting there, Sakina, because we actually need to look at what they have in common before we look at the specific differences that they bring as leaders. Both Mbali and John are people who've been in the DA for quite a long time. They've risen through the ranks. So we're not looking at two candidates who have been parachuted to run for the leadership of the party. In many ways, we saw that when Mmusi Maimane arrived in as early as 2015. He had been a very little known about member of the party who suddenly evolved, really on the Helen Zille card and was, put up for the position of leadership. In this case, it's very different. Both Mbali and John have risen through the ranks. Mbali, of course, is a member of the KZN legislature, and she's the former DA youth leader, and she's really worked her way up through the ranks of the party. So we're dealing with a candidate that is solid, that understands process, that understands the DA from the inside out, and in many ways has also been labeled a rogue and a rebel to many, as she has on many instances taken on leadership on differing opinions very vocally. And John Steenhuisen, on the other hand, we know he's the former chief whip in the National Assembly. He has led the DA on an official capacity, and he's also been somebody that has risen through the ranks of the party. So in many ways, I think whether it goes to Mbali or to John, what I am comfortable with as far as this federal Congress is concerned, that we have two leaders that actually know and understand the party, because we've seen in previous years how important this becomes, because once you understand the process and once you understand how the party operates, it's easier for you as a leader to almost put your stamp on it. We've seen Mbali Ntuli saying that if she comes into the party, she's going to make structural changes to a number of systems regarding I think it's the legal commission or one of their decision-making parties. So she's got her own set of changes that she wants to implement. She says currently there is a lack of acceptance of diverse voices in the party, and that's what she's aiming to implement, that there should be a greater acceptance of robust conversation. Let's differ in opinion quite publicly and not be afraid that the party is going to be brought into disrepute. John, on the other hand, has been pushing a narrative of stabilizing the party, of bringing the party back to its glory years. And, those who've been at the forefront of this party from the beginning are saying that John is the best candidate to steady the ship, to grow the party's constituency again after they suffered a massive blow in the 2019 elections. So I think both of them bring their own set of energy. Well, we'll see which way the delegates vote this coming weekend.
Gabriel, what's your view on what the two candidates have to offer?
Yeah, so I think in order to understand that question, we do need to go back and look at what led to the Democratic Alliance's disappointing result in 2019. And in part, it was a failure to have robust debate, just as Khanyi mentions, in particular about BEE. So Gwen Ngwenya was the head of policy at the time, and she resigned from the party shortly before the election because she said, we've been trying to have a debate about this policy, and Mmusi Maimane won't allow that to happen. And so I'm stepping out because we're not taking policy seriously. And then shortly after that, there were comments leaked to the media that Mmusi Maimane had said, shut up, when delegates had tried to raise the question of whether the DA should abandon race as a proxy for disadvantage. So I think that sent a signal to a lot of South Africans of all creeds, classes and colours that the DA was basically ANC light, that it had the same ideological framework, and that it didn't offer a credible alternative other than being staffed by different people. And so you can choose which personality you prefer, but if you want to vote on policy, you really don't have much of a choice. Since then, under Steenhuisen as interim leader, Gwen Ngwenya has returned, and this year the DA has adopted her official policy, her policy officially, of abandoning the idea that race is a proxy for disadvantage. And now Steenhuisen speaks out to that directly, so does Ivan Pillay, so does various members of the DA's senior structures. But Mbali Ntuli seems to have a different idea. She says that race shouldn't be a proxy for disadvantage, but that it is. That so entrenched is the sort of apartheid legacy that we still have to judge people by whether they're black or white. And I mean, that's clearly a very appealing idea politically in the media. She gets a lot of support for that. And it's worked pretty well for the ANC. So maybe her argument is that it can work for the DA too. So I think that's the primary sort of policy or ideological question on which these candidates seem to differ. And delegates are going to have to make up their mind as to which alternative offers the most attractive route forward, both from a political perspective, that is to say, growing the number of votes that they get, and there's key elections coming up next year, and also from a principled perspective, which is morally right and which is wanting.
So, Gabriel, before I go back to Khanyi, speaking of ideology, is the DA able to succinctly capture what exactly its ideology is that it will present to the South African voter in next year's local government elections?
On this question, I think the answer is yes, and their policy document spells it out clearly. Their policy is non-racialism. It means saying, if you want to figure out who needs help, and there are millions of South Africans that desperately need help, you don't look at the color of their skin, you look at their income. You don't look at the color of their skin, you look at their educational background. You don't look at the color of their skin, you look at how poorly served their community is. If there's a community where there's potholes and corrupt police, then you go and help them out. Doesn't matter what color they are. If you've got a community where people are rich and doing well for themselves and driving around in fancy sports cars, they don't need extra subsidies, whether they're black or white. I think that's a very simple idea, and I think that's an idea that they're going to try and sell if John Steenhuisen wins, and that I think they'll probably fudge or massage away if Mbali Ntuli wins.
So, Khanyi, it would seem that for especially white voters, white members of the DA, that race isn't necessarily a factor, while for most black voters, as Gabriel had just pointed out, and the ticket that Mbali would be riding on, it is a factor, and economic redress continues to be a factor. So, for the most part, do you believe that the DA is alive to the fundamental challenges that all of this brings?
I think it's too early in the game to think or aspire to non-racialism as a practical way of dealing with the very real and glaring issues of inequality that are currently existing in this country. I mean, Gabriel says that according to John Steenhuisen, the DA under his leadership would abandon race as a proxy for disadvantage. Now, if I had to take Gabriel's own sentiments, if I look at person X and I disregard their race and I look at their income, I look at where they live, I look at how well serviced their area is, I look at the economic opportunities they have available to them, I look at the educational opportunities that are available to them. At the end of the day, if I lift the veil on that person X, I'm still very much going to come up with the black person, because the true fact of the matter is that non-racialism says that we shouldn't look at race as proxy for disadvantage. But at the end of the day, the true fact of the matter is that South Africa has a historical background of looking at race as a proxy for not only disadvantage, but for inequality. Apartheid existed because, of racial inequalities. And we cannot look to a future of non-racialism without being practical about the fact that BEE exists to redress economic inequalities. Race quotas exist to address issues of inequality. And if the DA is saying that moving forward, we won't look at a person's race and we are moving towards a policy of non-racialism, then I think that you're going to be opening loopholes for us to go back and we're going to regress. We're not going to progress as a society, because that kind of policy is open to manipulation, because you can say that, a community may be black, but they aren't at the most, at the bottom, the most disenfranchised. We'll start looking at issues of economic inclusion where race is not a factor. And I don't think we're there yet as a country. We are really not at a point where we can look at non-racialism as a policy to lead this country forward.
And we're running out of time, and fast. So if I can just put this to both of you, the Zille factor in this particular election that will be playing out this weekend. To quote Douglas Gibson, he said that Helen Zille was well organized and intelligent, but that she needs to keep quiet about matters outside the portfolio that she may be occupying going forward. So how much of a factor is Helen Zille, given what has happened in the DA? You saw the resignation of senior members of the party in the recent past, and many of them have come out and mentioned the Zille factor in all of this. So, Gabriel, how much of a factor is she going to be in what happens to the DA this weekend?
I think Zille is an important factor. She's the federal chairperson of their executive, but I don't think she's nearly as important a factor as the material facts on the ground. Most South Africans know that most poor people are black, but they also know that there are poor white people, poor Indian people, and poor colored people. They also know that the elite is a very diverse rainbow. So if you look at Stats SA's data, it shows that the black elite, the black top 10%, earns 25% of national income. That's the largest share of any particular group. The BEE elite, the BEE top 10%, earns more than all white people put together. So the idea that we're still at a stage where you can tell if someone's rich or poor by looking at the color of their skin is just totally, look out your window and you'll see a different reality. And I think that the idea that non-racialism is not going to be attractive to black people, that's not what I said. You put those words in my mouth. I don't think non-racialism is more attractive to white people or black people. I think a lot of white people feel a lot of white guilt. They like the idea of BEE. They also like the idea of doing shady deals. But I think the vast majority of South Africans stand in a different position where they want to judge people by the content of their character. And I think that matters more than any particular individual. So whether Mbali Ntuli wins or John Steenhuisen wins, whether Helen Zille tweets or whether she stays quiet, the real question is, are we going to have a major political party that offers a credible alternative to the ANC, EFF, tripartite, quintartite alliance, which says, here's how you figure out who needs help. Look at the color of their skin. And if they happen to be wearing Gucci and they happen to fly to Dubai and they happen to have a house in Sandhurst, don't worry about that. They still count as previously disadvantaged. Is there going to be an alternative to that? I don't know, but we'll see come Monday.
All right, then we just have to wrap it up. So let me ask both of you, in wrapping this conversation, how do you think this is going to play out, and what would it mean for the DA going forward, looking at both scenarios, whether Mbali Ntuli or John Steenhuisen emerges victorious? Khanyi?
Well, I definitely think that John shouldn't think that it's going to be a clear-cut win for him. I think that Mbali Ntuli is going to put up a strong fight. But Sakina, before I go, I think it's definitely important for me to respond to Gabriel and say race is not, it's a very simplistic way to say that, people just simply look at a person's skin color and decide whether that person gets help or not. Of course, issues of class are also important. The class factor is non-racial. You have white people, you have black people who are sitting in the top echelons that he has spoken about. So it's a very simplistic way, and we should actually move away from that to say it's just simply a matter of phrase, oh, if you're black, you qualify, oh, you're white, you don't qualify. No, I think that's a simplistic and rather condescending way of looking at who should, be given help or who should be given assistance. I think that Mike Moriarty is going to give Helen Zille a run for her money, as well as they both contest the Federal Council chairperson position. And I think come Sunday, we're going to be surprised. I don't want to call it. I don't want to say it's going to John or it's going to Mbali, but what I am interested in is how the new leader is going to stabilize the party, especially in the run-up to the local government elections next year.
And final thoughts there for you, Gabriel, very briefly.
I wonder if Mbali Ntuli loses, whether she'll follow the same trajectory as Patricia de Lille and join the ANC. I think she's done a very good job of criticizing the DA, of attacking it, calling it racist, systemically racist, and so on. That's worked for Patricia de Lille. It could work for Mbali Ntuli too. If she wins and Steenhuisen loses, I think likewise it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around in the party. I think that's in a very unfortunate place to be. You want it to be the case that the loser is definitely going to stay with the party, because party loyalty should matter and people should want to make change from inside the structures that, as Khanyi said, they both know so well. The broader question is going to be, how do they perform next year? And also, how do they perform? There's 100 council elections coming up towards the end of the next month because of the fact that COVID kept all those local council elections away. So that's going to be something very important to look at. And we'll see how South Africans respond to the contrasting ideas about how it is that we should judge each other and how it is that we can go forward.
Well, thanks to both of you, political analyst Khanyi Magubane and Institute for Race Relations analyst Gabriel Crouse, for discussing the current state of the Democratic Alliance as it goes to an elective conference this weekend.